Welcome to the Off the Pole podcast. I'm Sarah Scott, and in episode 17, I speak to Dr. Emily Scherb, also known as the Circus Doc. She's a physical therapist, instructor, and a practising aerialist for over 25 years. She works with professional and pre-professional circus artists, and she is the resident physical therapist at the School of Acrobatics and New Circus Arts, as well as for the contemporary circus company Acrobatic Conundrum. She's just released a new book called Applied Anatomy of Aerial Arts, and I loved having the opportunity to sit down and drill her with questions. I hope it's the first of many.
Welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for doing my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
The Circus Doc, which we're going to be linking to all of your social media stuff and website and all that stuff. So if people haven't heard of you, they can obviously find out about you there. Thank you for giving up your morning. It's 9 a.m. where you are? And
about 9 a.m. Yeah.
5 p.m. I am, so we're a little bit spread out, but we've managed to make it work, which is fantastic. So I've posted in my Off the Pole community group and that I was going to be interviewing you, and got lots of questions from them. So I'm going to be touching on some of those in a bit. But I'd like to start off with hearing about your book that you've got coming out, or has it already been released?
It is about to come out next week.
Ah, fantastic. So yeah, a little bit about your book, what's coming out, and what led you to write it.
Absolutely. So the book is called Applied Anatomy of Aerial Arts. I've got my copies already,
so shiny.
But they're not quite out for general public yet. So yes, it's an anatomy book based on how our bodies actually work in the air. So it is talking about the basics of anatomy, how they work for everybody, and then how that specifically works when we change how gravity works on our body and are hanging from our hands instead of standing on our feet.
I'm so excited about this book. I know there's so many people that are going to be completely geeking out at this news that this book's coming out, because it's so hard. Like, you want to do research, you want to find out about how to look after your body, and then you look at all the anatomy pictures and the videos out there, and everyone is just stood on the floor, and it doesn't work the same. Like, it completely changes when we're flipping around in the air. So this is so exciting, and you've got a huge background in this area. What came first, like the physical therapy or the aerial?
Oh, most definitely the aerial. I started doing aerial back in about 1991 or 2.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it for a very, very long time. I started off as a gymnast and found my way into circus as a relatively youngster. And it was just, instead of having to compete and having to perform that way, instead I get to perform and then people clap. Like, this is fun.
Yeah.
And there was similar challenges on the body and similar demands of a training schedule to keep myself in shape to do it. And so I really just fell in love and started doing it back then, kept doing it, started teaching, and have been kind of teaching ever since my late teen years. So I just continued applying all of that knowledge I learned as a teacher and as a performer to what I learned in physical therapy school. And it's kind of amazing how much looking at movement and watching other people's bodies work and understanding how your body works and then applying the science, you really understand it at a much different level. So it's been fun now as a clinician to be able to combine the two and be able to give back to the community and treat all my lovely aerial, circus, pole, fun, wonderful humans, and to learn so much more about how even other people's bodies works and not just mine, and applying all the science behind it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's such a interesting perspective from someone who's come from aerial to then go so deep into the physical therapy side of it to be able to try and relay that back, because, you know, pole and aerial as a sport, art, dance form, however you want to describe
Whatever you want
it,
to call it, yeah.
is I think it's all of those things and more. It's relatively new for the general public to be taking it on, you know, like from a gymnastic point of view or a circus point of view. Obviously, it's been around for many, many years longer, but to take kind of the general public and then put them into that kind of activity it can be hugely dangerous as well as hugely beneficial. Like, we're kind of walking this tightrope of kind of danger and benefit. So, and there's kind of the long-term, you know, what the long-term impact on people's bodies, I think, is only really starting to come out now. Are there any real patterns that you see from treating people that you've taught or that you see other people teaching that you see constantly crop up time and time again?
Absolutely.
You're probably gonna say shoulders, something.
Oh wait, what? What is that? No.
I know I'm breaking some new ground here.
Yeah, shoulders. And I love them, but they are such a complex joint, and we use them often at the end range of their mobility of a very mobile joint. And then we ask them to be really stable, support our whole body weight, and then turn us upside down. Yeah, so we're asking a lot of a relatively complex joint, one of the most mobile joints in the body, and a relatively unresearched joint because of that. Mm-hmm. The shoulder is a really, really complex mobile joint, like I've said, and because of that, it's hard to break it down and put like electrodes on the different muscles. It's hard to fully understand what's working where, and there's so many human variations about where the muscles can attach that it's sometimes hard to generalize. So unlike the knee, which is a nice simple joint, it goes back and forth, the shoulder just doesn't have the research behind it. So not only are we asking a lot of these joints, we know less about them than a lot of the other joints in the body.
Okay, so well, that's promising.
So basically, we're learning more every day. And
so basically, people are like
we know a lot.
Staying away from them. They're like, that's just going to be too much work. I'm just going to leave that one. I'm going to go for knees.
Yeah, no, we're trying to learn more, but it's definitely why it's slower to learn about it.
I definitely feel like the more I've tried to learn about the body, like almost like the less I feel like I know. I know that's kind of a bit, not necessarily making sense, but yeah, it's great. Like I'm more and more interested in it, but I feel like
to get the questions. You're truly learning.
I feel like I've fixed one little bit, or I find out about one little bit, and then that opens up about 5 more doorways into be like, yeah, but this now, and then you have to look at them, and then you're like, oh no, I've got to go off in this direction. It can feel quite overwhelming. Is there any kind of solid tips that you would say to someone who's maybe just starting to think about looking into their body and how to, other than buying your book, obviously?
Well, first buy my book. No, no, I really think the first thing to start doing is to, if you're in the pole community, start talking to your coaches and ask them what they think should be working. And then just seeing in your own body, can I feel that working? Can I connect to the different muscles in my body? I'm always amazed. Some people have no problem with that. They're like, this is my biceps. I will fire my biceps. And other people are like, I can bend my arm, but I don't really know that's my biceps. So the first thing to do is kind of try to feel your own muscles in your own body working so you can kind of get acquainted with that. And then try to look at anatomy texts, looking at images, or there's some great anatomy videos online where you can see the muscles working. And that's really fun because you're like, okay, I can see that. Can I feel that? Because I think the key is to really start to feel it in your own body, especially if you're exploring it as a performing artist. Because if you can't feel it in your own body, then you can't make the changes that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So find it in yourself, compare it to what you think you should be feeling, try to make those correlations and connections.
Yep. How much do you feel like your own kind of knowledge and study ties in with your own training? Like how much do you use that knowledge in your everyday training?
Oh my gosh. It is actually kind of embarrassing because I did start so young and the knowledge was even less than, I know you touched on it before, of how much more the general public is getting involved. Recreational aerial arts in general have just, exploded. In the last decade, the number of schools, the number of people teaching, the number of people learning has just gone wild, and that's really increased the knowledge that we have around it. But that means when I started, there was so little knowledge, and now I go back into the studio and I just try to fix all of the problems that I developed over the years. So
I was going to say, like, is there anything that you could like tell yourself back then that you know now?
God. So much. I look at the old actual film photos because I didn't have a digital camera, and I'm like, oh, Emily, when you're hanging from your knees, open your hips, squeeze your butt, use your core. Hanging from my arms, they've gone down now, but because I don't train as much as I used to, unfortunately. But my lats were about like this wide, and I used them for everything and just torqued the heck out of my shoulders. I mean, you want to use them when you turn upside down, but you don't need to use them all the time at full blast like I was doing. But yeah, definitely there are things I am constantly still working on to this day, because when my knowledge increased, my training time decreased, and now it's harder to keep those things all in check. but I could spend an entire workout just correcting a basic inversion or a basic knee hang.
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty's in the details when you start to get really into it, and actually just getting into the movement is actually becomes kind of the least important thing. It's how you're getting in, how you're getting out of it, and what you're feeling when you're in there, and then comboing it, and endurance of holding it, and doing it on both sides, and all the rest of it. So I think there's a big push nowadays for people to try and get like quantity over quality in their tricks, which is kind of an industry problem, and it's not any one person's fault. Not to blame one person, but I feel like students have a lot of pressure to be like next. Whereas like
it's exciting.
Back in the day, there just wasn't the same number of tricks, so you could spend a huge amount of time on, you know, a leg hang, and that would be it, because that's, you know, it was all there was really, just leg hang and a Superman. You could win a competition. It was great. Yeah, ta-da! People were amazed with your knee hold. Now they, you know, it's not the same.
There's a lot of pressure. I think it's a lot harder to enter the industry now than it was before. You know, there's so much more pressure. There's you know, Instagram is great. It's wonderful. It's a great way to share, but it's a lot of pressure when you're looking at everyone else and seeing, oh, that person's doing that and that person's doing that. But one of the biggest joys of my nerdy life is going in and having that very frustrating but very meditative practice of just working one thing and trying to make it perfect.
Yes, I'm exactly the same. I'd much prefer to do like an hour and a half on one thing and just like really get to the grips of it rather than lots of little things. But it is also a problem, you know, and I'm part of the problem. I post on Instagram all the time. Right. And you also only really post what you're really happy with, which is normally the finished product, and so people don't see like the hours that have come before that of the warm-ups and the mobility and the figuring it all out, and then the rehab afterwards when you've done it too many times because you pushed it too far, and
you're like, oh, I did the same thing too many times in a row. There's problems with that too. yes
exactly. Is there any kind of one, I know one of the questions I did get from the group that did kind of segue into that, Sarah or Sarah, it's one of those with an H, without an H. Please could you ask about training regimes? What gives an artist, or let's say an amateur juggling a full-time job, the optimal chance to develop well as an artist and safely? So if you're trying to fit in training plus regular life, like is there, I know there's no like magical number of, you know, you should train this much, but is there any way that you recommend of how to balance it out?
Yeah, one of the biggest things, so it's interesting because it really is a balance, because I have two things to say on the matter, is consistency and rest. So consistency is probably the hardest thing for most adults that have a full-time job and train. I know it is for me. So training a minimum of 3 times a week to maintain what you've got, and probably 3 to 4 times a week to make true gains is generally a good rule. But the consistency thing is the real key thing. You need to be training on a regular basis. You need to have a plan and a goal, making a training plan, creating your goal list and how you want to get there. So if your goal is a certain skill, what kind of strength do you need to get there? Are you doing strength training in addition to just pull? A lot of aerial is interesting because we tend to go up, do 1 or 2 skills, come back down, rest, talk to our friends, wait for somebody else in class to do their thing. So working on cardio and connecting things is a really important component that people sometimes leave out. But for just pull and just not even worrying about the rest of the training regime, trying to train pull 3 times a week can really help keep the consistency level of load on your tissues, load on your muscles and tendons, so that they are not going to break down and get injured. And then trying to push that a little bit, and you can probably make some gains in strength. The hard thing is when you go away and take a break, coming back in without getting injured, you need to kind of give your body the chance to readjust and kind of go back a level as well. So respecting when you don't have the chance to make those gains. But the key really is train consistently, and don't have big fluctuations in your training. So if you're taking a huge break, be careful when you come back. If you're ramping up for a competition, make sure you make slow incremental changes. Don't just all of a sudden the week before the comp say, I'm going to go in every day and train really hard and add that new skill.
Yeah.
Because that's when things break down and you get hurt. So if you have a competition coming up in like 3 months out, you kind of want to peak your training ramp 2 to 3 weeks before that competition, so that you can cruise on into it, feel really comfortable with your skills, and your body is well rested. It's one of the things I see a lot here in my practice is people getting injured right before shows or right before competitions because they're trying to add that one new move or they've really ramped up their intensity. So when you're training, make sure any changes are incremental, that you give your body the time to adjust to the load. But the key is warm up well, do your cardio, add some strength training, keep your mobility so your muscles are all balanced, and train consistently.
Yep.
So it's kind of the things in general that people say a lot, but they're true.
I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like this is, and sometimes we all need reminding of stuff that we already know, but to have someone with your background say it like, no, this is going to help. This is really what the professionals recommend. I think is very, very useful because we can all think it and it's nice, but it's nice to have the backup of someone saying like, no, this is a great baseline. Of course, listen to your body. If 3 times is too much, blah, blah, blah. You know, everyone's going to be slightly different, but having that baseline of something to work from, I think is really, really helpful for people. And as I say, like around competitions and shows, people will naturally just, ramp up the training. And
it's so exciting.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it's great to get in it. And it's a great push to get yourself in and train if you have something like that. But I definitely feel it if I've got, the, repetitive strain type injuries start creeping in. You start getting like, oh, my shoulder's just achy kind of all the day now rather than just after I train. And
then it's time to take it back up a little bit, take some rest, do some self-care.
Is there and I know a lot of these questions are going to be very much like for the individual, but is there a kind of a point, because a lot of the time I think pole dancers and aerialists, we get used to being in pain quite often. Is there a kind of a recommended time when you should go see a professional, or is there a lot more people should be taking more responsibility and more self-care, or is it going to be more as a based on a case-by-case basis?
Well, so certainly a little bit case-by-case basis, but there are some general guidelines. The first is to recognize the difference between soreness and pain. So if you're training and you have soreness immediately, chances are it's more likely to be some kind of tissue damage. If you have soreness after 24 hours and it's kind of muscle and in the middle of the muscle belly, that's going to be more like delayed onset muscle soreness. The more traditional, I worked that muscle really hard, that should go away within 72 hours. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't go away and you have that immediate onset of soreness or pain, that's when you want to get checked out. Certainly, if you have something that happens immediately and you have sharp pain and you cannot use it, you're going to want to get that checked out pretty quickly. But I think really what you're talking about is that like, oh, my shoulder hurts and it's been hurting for a while. Is this a good thing, bad thing? Am I getting stronger or is my shoulder falling apart?
Yeah.
Is it slowly coming off? Anything that doesn't go away or is at least starting to get better after a week or so, it's best to get checked out. If it's getting better, great. Keep doing what you're doing, but you might want to back down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And certainly after 2 weeks, if it's getting worse or not going away, definitely get it looked at. One of the best things you can do is for shoulders, because of course shoulders are everything, is to really balance what you're doing. So if you're doing a lot of pulling, if you're doing a lot of inverting, and you're constantly pulling your arms towards your body, it's really great to work some things that are pushing and going away from your body, whether that's through weights or through other movement practices. Sometimes that's enough to balance it out. But if the basic things of getting stronger and balancing your muscles don't help, certainly go see someone. We're all here to help you and answer questions. So find someone great and hold on to them forever.
Yeah. I think that's also part of what people kind of get frustrated with. I think we see a lot on the community group. A lot of people are going in there for kind of like diagnosis advice. And a lot of people go back and say, go see a professional, but then a lot of people are like, who do I go see? Because, my physio isn't used to dealing with someone who's in aerial, or my doctor hasn't got a clue what I'm saying, and I tried to show him a video and he got uncomfortable, or just stop and rest, which I know is fine, but a lot of these girls then won't. Girls, boys, women, whatever, everyone just wants to keep training. Humans.
Yes. Well, it's easier if someone says, okay, I fully understand what you do. it's time to take a rest, or I fully understand what you do. Don't do these 3 things, but you can do these 3 things, so it is ideal if you can find someone who kind of gets you. In the US, I do have a list on my website of PTs that have reached out and said they love treating aerialists.
That's helpful.
I don't have an international list right now, but I'm trying to grow it. So hopefully soon we'll have more and more as our community grows. There's certainly as it's all exploded in the US now, people over the last decade that have gotten involved in it are now going back to school and getting their degrees. So there's going to be more and more and more of us over the next 3 to 5 years. I think there's really going to be an explosion. So hopefully the community will start seeing the benefits. But ask the other people in your studio, ask your coaches, see who they see, try to get information from your community, or reach out to professionals that you may not be in your community, but are part of it and might be able to offer you advice for where you are locally, or at least know who you should be asking. So it's hard. It's putting a lot of burden on the performing artist, but your body's your instrument and your tool. You gotta take care of it.
Are there any things, especially around shoulders? I know we've got a lot of questions about shoulders, like one, how to strengthen them and stabilize them, but also how to increase flexibility whilst maintaining that strength and that stability, which is kind of, we're asking a huge amount, as we said earlier. Is there anything that people should be at least starting off with, so they don't get too overwhelmed, so that they don't have to wait until they get an injury or, they're in pain before they go see someone?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of prehab that you can do to keep your body safe. Understanding the shoulder is helpful too. So the way the shoulder works is you have to think of it as it's kind of floating on the body. The only place the shoulder is attached by an actual joint to the torso is at your clavicle, so right in the front, where your collarbone meets your rib cage. And other than that, it's all attached with muscle. So you really have to keep everybody really happy and balanced. And the thing is, in aerial arts, what we do is the same thing over and over again. And so we get certain groups of muscles super strong and other muscles not so much. So we really need to make sure that, first of all, our technique is great. So work on your technique, work with other people. Don't just train on your own. At least have a training partner or a good coach that you trust, and hopefully your technique is great. So first perfect what you're actually doing, but then learn what the things are that you need to be doing to balance that out. So again, in aerial, we do a ton of pulling. You got to do some pushing to balance that out. So I always say to people, hey, just do some handstands, because that's really fun and way more fun than pushing weights up over your head versus having to do pulling all the time. And the other thing is our rotator cuffs are the things that hold our arm to our shoulder blade. And when I say rotator cuff, a rotator cuff is not one muscle, it's a muscle group. A little more than half of them do external rotation, or rotating the arm out to the side. And then we have a few of them that rotate the arm in towards the body. And we need to keep them all strong. We're really good as humans at bringing our arms together in the front. And that we use our internal rotators and our pecs to do that grip. And so they're pretty big muscles going on. Our lats help with that too. They're internal rotators as well. And then our external rotators are these tiny little muscles that when our arms are straight up over our head, we're using the most. And so those need to be so very strong in anyone who hangs from their arms. So external rotator cuff work. So training those muscles to get them super strong. Working on those rotator cuff exercises. The one I see most commonly is the one with the TheraBand attached, or you're holding it in your hand and you're rotating your arm out to the side. Even doing that, make sure your shoulders set really well, that you're in a good position, that you're actually using your rotator cuff, that you're not squeezing your arm in next to your body or rotating your torso to get that motion instead of actually using the rotator cuff. But getting that rotator cuff strong and keeping it strong, and making sure that it's not the first thing to give out on your body when you're training. Because if that goes, you start running into problems of the shoulder joint not working well. So you've got to make sure the shoulder joint itself is working well, and then all the muscles around the shoulder blade are playing nice and balanced. And so strength is a huge component. But the other part that you're talking about in the mobility, it's amazing how much more mobility you get when your muscles are balanced. So if you balance your pulling and your pushing, your external and your internal rotation, and all the muscles are happy and working together, your arm is free to move in all the ranges of motion that it has available to it, and you don't have to force it nearly as much. So when I talk about mobility work, I really like to talk about strengthening at end range and really working on getting strong there so that you have the control and your body lets the arm move where it needs to go. So I like things like laying on your stomach with your arm up overhead, so you're at very end range of the shoulder, and then turning the palm up, so you're now engaging that rotator cuff and trying to lift your arm up off the ground. It is so hard.
Yes.
It
is that the like
so hard.
the YTW exercises? Is that the?
It's a variation on that. So it's all the way up overhead. I cheated even more to have palm up because we need more range of motion than the average human.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've only ever really done it thumb up. I've not taken it
try
to there.
Palm up.
But even there, you
impossible.
know it's going to be really
You're like,
bad.
oh, it's so hard.
It's going to be dirty. Dirty, but good.
Oh, it's so bad. And if that's too hard, you can do it on your hands and knees, so you have a bigger range of motion to work from, or pile up over some pillows, so you've got a little bit more to work with. But if you can lift your arm off the ground with your palm up, laying on your stomach, your shoulder mobility is going to be awesome.
Gold star for you.
Gold star.
I would be very impressed. The people in the gym, again, if you were doing it there, probably would just, what is she doing? She's lying on the floor. But everyone else...
She's like lying on the floor grunting and can't lift her arm. And this guy's got like 40 pounds of bad form bicep curls.
But I guarantee he definitely won't be able to lift his arm off the floor with his
would not be able to do it.
Not a chance. So it's always the small, non-interesting, doesn't look like you're doing anything exercises, which you'll be sweating instantly. And they're the ones that are the most helpful. And I mean, if you were going to say, again, because I've got a number in my head, but you're a professional, so I want to ask you.
Yes.
If you're saying to someone, right, get in there, start doing some rotator cuff strengthening to help stabilize your shoulder, how many times a week? What do they start off with?
Like, it depends.
I know, everyone's going to ask. They'll be like, how many times should I do this a week? And you're like, 3. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but really, the body does really well with about every other day, giving things a rest day, but still getting things stronger. So 3 to 4 times a week, it's kind of the magic number of giving the body a little bit of a break, but still getting the training going. Depending on what your training is like, you can do it after your training to fatigue. You can do it like a light rotator cuff warm up or shoulder strengthening warm up, just to get your arms going,
get them firing. Yeah,
get them firing, get the patterns going the way you want, and then you can do stuff to fatigue after training. So if your training practice didn't fatigue your muscles, you're burning them out so they can keep getting stronger. So it's a nice adjunct to your actual training process. Or if you're doing it on separate days, make sure you're not so tired when you go into the studio that you can't work properly. Fatigue has not been studied yet with aerial, but I say yeah, because hopefully in the future we will have all of these beautiful researchers going around and studying it for us. But it would be really interesting to see how the muscles fatigue before and after training, and what that looks like and how our other training affects it.
I have a mastiff trying to get in shot. Go away. Go lie down. Go over there. He's like, it's almost dinner time. So, no, not yet. In a bit. I said dinner. Now he's really,
now he's really excited.
Anyway, segueing into, I know you said earlier about we're very good at pulling inwards, and I know a lot of people's everyday, like day-to-day life, that requires a lot of that as well. Like we're driving, we're on our phone, computers, all of that stuff, and that kind of ties into I'm really interested in posture and how that affects a lot of students. That like, they'll come in after being in a one position for 8 hours of the day, and then the 1 hour of that day, that training, they want to go in completely the opposite direction. That can be super challenging. You're like, well, what have you done today? You've just sat in one position with your, arms internally rotated. Now you're asking them to externally rotate and be perfectly comfortable there.
Come all the way back here.
Yeah. Why isn't this feeling good or working? Is there, the specific question was from, I'm trying to get people's names in as well. So Crystal Shute said, do you have any tips on years of bad posture? Because she's getting really frustrated with having to kind of undo years of bad posture. We find out that we need good posture for aerial, and then it's a long road back.
Yeah. So it kind of goes way back to what we were talking about before, and you had asked me of how do you start if you're getting interested in anatomy. So first thing you have to change if you have what you think is bad posture is, can you find the muscles that you should be working? And as a side note, there is no bad posture as long as you can change it.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you can sit however you want all day long. That's fine. As long as you can also sit like this, and you can also put your arms back over your head. But if you're stuck in that curled forward posture, that's when you want to work on strengthening the opposite muscles. And the opposite muscles tend to be the muscles behind the shoulder blades in the back. Because as I said before, the shoulder blades kind of float on the body. And if your arms are always in front of you, and you're always doing things in front of you, those pecs get really strong. They tend to pull the shoulder blades forward. We get good at stabilizing with the front of our body, and we go to move our arms, and our back muscles are not doing anything. We're kind of got this hunched over thing where our upper trapezius of the neck and the pec are doing all the scapular stabilization, and we really need to move into the back muscles, getting into the middle and lower trapezius, into the serratus. Now I'm just name dropping.
That's fine. You can name drop all you want.
Name dropping my friends and muscles. But we really need to connect to the muscles between the shoulder blades and around the shoulder blades. So first waking those up and connecting to them, and then finding ways to strengthen them. For people that have that kind of stuck, persistent bad posture, often stretching is really hard for them because they can't stretch that. They can't stretch that pec. They can't stretch that shoulder open. Instead, they end up stretching the joint and kind of really putting a lot of torque on the shoulder. So really being aware of your body first, or having someone who's there to help you, a coach, a physio, someone who's there to watch to make sure you're doing the right thing. But strengthening in the back is what helps open up that chest and get you strong and stable. Pull can be great for that if your technique is perfect, or it can feed right into that if you're really have your hands in front of you and your shoulders forward to stabilize. So I want everyone to almost think when they're grabbing the pole, they're grabbing the pole and pulling it to their sternum. And so their chest has to kind of open to get there. If your shoulders are forward, it's going to feel really claustrophobic. And if your shoulders are open, it'll kind of help. So really opening that chest and bringing the pole into you. And then, of course, I have some favorite exercises. Maybe, Sarah, after this, we'll have to get together and I'll post some videos or something, and so people can kind of see the few things I'm talking about.
Fantastic, definitely.
But I have a favorite one with like a hands up, kind of back to the wall one that kind of is my favorite undo your workday posture exercise. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's one people have seen before, but I have a little twist on it where I make people pull their elbows forward so they're really connecting into their serratus and their rotator cuff to kind of help the shoulder blade motion.
Nice. I think it's good if people even have even if you just start off with like one or two things that you do at the end of the workday, rather than thinking, right, now I have to go do an hour's worth of stretching to go undo all that. If you're like, right, I'm just going to do like 5-10 minutes doing a couple of things, then it doesn't become overwhelming. And actually you see massive increases in big gains from actually like little steps. So I'd much prefer that kind of, if people can take something like that away from it, even just one thing that you change a day can actually make a big difference.
Yeah, even if you take multiple little breaks throughout your workday and just kind of think, once you've come into awareness of those back muscles, like, can I fire them? Can I open things up? Let me hold this while I go back to work, but ignore it and like just go back to typing and doing your email. And then, the phone rings. Okay, that's my cue because I've fallen out of that posture to pull back up again and use your workday as your strengthening. There's no reason why you can't start to work those muscles.
Sit up now, everybody.
Use this podcast. Sit up now.
See if you can hold it until the end of to the end of the podcast. I guarantee as soon as you started talking about posture, everyone would have sat up anyway.
Yeah.
I'm fine with my posture.
But it's amazing because when you're doing that, you're using those stiff, tight muscles as your weights, right? Yeah. You're using the opposite muscles to pull against them, and you're like lifting those heavy pecs. Yeah. So you can use your body as your own little weight system at work.
And I do, especially if you're in a train station or an airport, you start like getting a bit judgy of people. Oh, yeah. You're like, you start people watching. They're like, her knees are turning in, and like she's rounding her back. You know,
you're like, oh, that looks like it's gotta hurt. Yeah.
She doesn't look like she's been thinking about her posture today.
No. Yeah, but again, they're traveling. Maybe they had a bad day. That's not their normal posture. They can move in and out of it. They have no pain. Yeah.
It's my fun airport game. Let me be. It's fine. So I've got a couple of questions. I know I could honestly natter along to you all day, but we've definitely had loads of questions about hypermobility, especially elbows and shoulders. Any tips on specifically how to work with them?
Yes, anyone who's hypermobile, you guys are amazing. We certainly have our share of it. in the aerial world, I feel like it definitely attracts because the lines are so beautiful and it's so much fun and it really uses it, but you do have to work harder. So well done. Way to get where you are, but it's always a little bit extra work. So the key to hypermobility is train a lot and train in mid-range. So that you're aware. The problem, one of the biggest problems with hypermobility is not knowing where straight is. For a lot of people who are pretty stiff, it's very easy. It's when my arm stops moving. That's straight. But for hypermobility, you need to find straight and strength in there and balance those muscles so they can stabilize your joint so you're not relying on your joint structure or your ligaments to actually hold you together. So finding mid-range, maybe doing some plank positions and kind of watching your elbows and holding them there, seeing if you can hold it and strengthen there, and then playing with it on the pole. But it is a lot more work. And it takes a little bit longer for hypermobile people generally to gain that strength and that control because they don't have the same cues of, I just stopped moving there, that normals, I'm air quoting right now, that normals do. So working mid-range, what feels like mid-range to you, but is actually straight, and gaining the strength there and making it a priority.
That's very good advice. So if you want like kind of longevity, it's worth doing the time at the beginning, or at least even when you find out about it, to kind of pull it back, and that's actually going to make you a lot longer in the industry than just like, oh, well, it feels fine now, I don't feel any pain now, but down the line you're just going to end up having to cut yourself off from it, and that's just going to make you sad because without
and then you
pole,
can,
who are we?
Yeah, it's like no, we can't. If we're not in the air, why? But yeah, and then you can use that beautiful line and that beautiful extension, that hypermobility when you want to, but you're not a slave to it. Same thing with the posture. It's the same idea. If you're stuck at that end range and you're stuck in that hypermobility, it's not nearly as useful to you as if you have choices about where your body is.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And this might tie in, the last question I want to hit to you is from Louise Young, and she had comments underneath with people kind of agreeing that this was a good question they'd like to know. Have you ever worked with anyone with dyspraxia? And if so, did you find a way to help them understand their movement when doing aerial? So this might tie in with kind of the whole learning about their body and anatomy and this kind of thing. Buy your book. Segues. See?
You're so good.
I'm not getting paid for this podcast, by the way. I'm very excited for your book, though. But yeah, so have you come across it? Do you have any hints and tips for getting people more aware of their body, especially when upside down? I think it's a very common problem that when you're upside down, it's like left is right, right is left, a foot is an arm, like no one has a clue.
Right. So there are a couple different types of dyspraxia, so it depends a little bit. But in general, breaking things down to small chunks. So learning things piece by piece and then trying to put the pieces together, one or two at a time. Learning left and right when you're upside down. I love different colored socks, which I know is really hard with pole, but or maybe getting some like those like kids make, the friendship bracelets, getting some of that, like just like soft cotton string, colored, different colors on your ankles and wrists. So it can be like red hand, blue foot. So you're not having to figure that out all the time. That works really well too if you're videoing yourself. For everybody, all these things work for everybody. It's just you have to, again, spend a little more time with them if you have other things going on. But that works great for video because you can be like, what foot went where?
Yeah.
Oh,
it was my blue one. Yeah. We both went for blue.
And then you're like, which one's the blue one? You look down, you're like, oh,
yeah, that one. That's the one.
It's got to be the blue one. It's always the blue one, that rogue blue foot,
It's always that blue foot. Typical.
Yeah,
I use the slap and tickle method, which is not as nice, I don't think. Like you slap the thing or you tickle or scratch, which is maybe a little bit not as good. I think probably the red.
It is if you can't see it. If you can't see it, it's helpful. Like this one, poke, 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 poke.
The one that I'm tapping or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but it helps. Also having that video, even if you are, as long as your school allows video and people don't have other things against it. I know some schools don't want that posted or allow for it. But if you have that for your own practice, even if you're in a class situation, sometimes it's helpful for you to see the movements that you just physically did. And so you're learning it visually, you're learning it physically, and you've got all those different learning styles kind of accounted for. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a videoer. I have to watch myself back. And even if half the time, well, 90% of the time, I just delete it and it doesn't have to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's just for you. Yes.
It's just so I can watch it back, see what I did wrong, or like make that leg was bending weird, or I need to straighten that leg, or that would be a much easier pathway. And I find video very, very helpful. And everyone's different, as you say, but if that's going to assist your learning and you haven't tried it before, then maybe give it a go. So yeah. Well, fantastic. We've done quite a long chat, so I will let you go. Otherwise, but it'd be awesome to have you back on again. I'm sure that
Absolutely.
there's going to be a ton more questions as soon as I posted this. And then maybe we can get some of the videos of some of your favourite exercises for the group. I'm sure that would be hugely well received as well. When your book comes out, when is your book coming out?
August 28th.
August 28th. So when this goes live, I think it will be launched. So I'll put all the links to it so everyone can obviously go find you. And you're the Circus Doc on Facebook and Instagram.
Yep, the Circus Doc at Facebook and Instagram, and you can find my website at thecircusdoc.com. But this is just so great, Sarah. The questions were amazing. Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions.
No, they gave me some great ones. They
really did.
Can't take credit for half of those, but but yeah, thank you so much for giving up some of your morning. And I'm sure we'll get to hopefully speak to you again soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I could have chatted to her all day. She's so helpful, and I can't wait to get my hands on her new book, which has been released since I recorded this podcast, to amazing reviews. I will link to everything you need to find the Circus Doc and her new book in the blog section of the Off the Pole website, where you can also find the other episodes there too.